Hello, so welcome back. Now it's been a while since I made the previous video. I was supposed to upload earlier, but my neighbours kept shouting their heads off, so it's hard to record in that time. So, let's talk about what we've got so far. So, in the last video, in case you didn't watch that, we just talked about how to get this environment set up, create an account, just the pure basics. One thing I should just let you know in the outset is, well, if you do have an account, click the gear icon and make sure autosave is set on. That way, if your computer does crash, it doesn't, you don't lose your content. Okay, so I think we talked about setting a color of the background here by changing these numbers, and they changed the color background for the image we're on. Now, we'll talk a bit more about that later, but just bear in mind that this means R, so that's supposed to be the intensity of your redness, and this is G, your intensity of your greenness, and then B, your intensity of your blueness. So shorthand this is called RGB. So if we run this again, you can see it's black. So if we do 255, this should be white. I'll explain more later, but just have an idea of what it's doing, and you can play around with it yourself. Okay, so we're going to actually look at functions today. These are functions here. So draw, set up, and this itself is a function, create canvas, and background is actual function here as well. Okay, so now, honestly, setting up with a tablet is so difficult. And of course it's backwards. Okay, so think of it like a function is just, I'll give it shorthand because writing on this is very hard, is basically an instruction, and these instructions take certain parameters, so that would be something, comma, something, comma, something. Now, these functions or these instructions are defined in references. So as we're using p5JS, there's a whole library of this, and there are functions in that library that we can use and utilize, and it makes it much easier to write code without having to write stuff from scratch. A lot of the stuff's predefined there. So yeah, so that's basic instruction. So you could have something like, so let's say function again, and that would take maybe 10, 20, 10, and then it could go on for a bit more. You just have to read the documentation and understand what that actually does. Okay, so let's write some functions out to draw a shape, shall we? So let's draw something like a rectangle. Let's see how that looks. If I can find my mouse on the screen. There we are. You've got that. Let's check we're recording that bit. Yeah, okay, cool. We're there. So the actual function name for a rectangle is rect. And then let's just type in some parameters, shall we? So let's say 10, let's say 200, let's say 10, let's say 50. Let's see what that does, right? Okay, cool. So we got something there. It's quite small. Let's see if we can increase that. Okay, we got it bigger. Cool. And just another thing, we're going to click auto refresh here so that we don't have to constantly press play when we make a change. So let's say, for example, you can see it automatically updates. Okay, cool. So what does this actually do? So let's look at the references for a minute. So if we go to our reference, so here and click references, we can go to rect, which is what we want, draw a rectangle, and it actually specifies what it actually does. So rectangle has rectangle with a four-sided shape defined by the x and y, w, and h parameters. Okay, so this pretty much details what it does. So the rectangle gets, the first parameter is the x coordinate, and the second is the y coordinate, the third is the w, so width, and then the fourth is the height. And then you got a few more parameters there, but we'll talk about that later. So let's jump back into Paint. So what does that mean? Just y coordinate, x coordinate, that sort of thing. So when you draw a shape like a rectangle, what that actually does, what you're actually doing is, there's a coordinate system in that. So if you've done like general maths, or I think to like a high school level, you should be able to understand what's going on. So you've got something called Cartesian coordinates, but we're just gonna use coordinates. It's probably simpler. Just talk about coordinate systems. Generally speaking, you have your center here, and that is coordinate 0, 0. And then you have something here, something here, something here. It gets greater, goes that way, it gets negative, negative, and positive. So think of this as plus, and here's negative. So as you go that way, positive, as you go there, negative. So this x would be somewhere between 1 and let's say 5. So that would be like your x coordinate would be 1 and your y coordinate would be 5. But with computer graphics, and because we're actually using pixel values, so we're going, when we say our x coordinate or y coordinate, we're actually specifying the pixel on the screen. So it would be your x number of pixels on the screen and the y number of pixels on the screen. So when we talk about computer graphics, so when we actually put a shape onto the screen, what's actually going on is you have something along this lines. So this 0, 0 coordinate here is actually the furthest left of the screen. So here, I don't know if you can see on the top corner here. That's your 0, 0 coordinate. And as you move further in your x, you go right. Okay, that makes sense. But as you go further in your y, you actually go down. So in this example here, where we're used to in maths, going down is negative. It would be like, this would be probably be -1, -1, right? But this one, you can only go positive and then positive down because your 0, 0 coordinates is in the corner. Yeah, so that's how basically it works. So if we go back to our screen and we specify here 0, 0, you'll see how it goes to the top right corner. You can't really see it because it overlaps on the my voice is going. On the boundary of the canvas. It overlaps on the boundary of the canvas, so you can't actually see the top corner. So yeah, something like that. But obviously there were other parameters there, right? So let's try playing with them. So let's change that to, let's say, 20, 20. You can see a bit more there, we can see more. Let's change that to, instead of 500, 200, so we can see the bottom. And let's plug in some more parameters. So 10, what does that do? Rounds all corners. Okay, let's do another one. Say 1. Okay, so it only rounds one corner now. So you can see this kind of, you just play around with it, plug in different parameters that you want, and you'll see how things just change by themselves. So if we go back to the references here, you can see that it kind of talks about what we did here. So ignore this one for the time being. We did this one. So TLTR, the number of radius top left corner, top right corner, bottom right, and blah blah blah. Right. So let's do something else now. Let's try and drawing a line. So again, if you go into the bottom here, we can see the general thing you need. All you need is an x1 coordinate, y1 coordinate, x2 coordinate, and y2 coordinate. So let's type them in. So let's go below. We'll say line. Put in something like say 100. Okay, cool, we've got something there. Let's try and have that intercept the shape. Okay, cool, so you can see it's going through the shape on the top. And just so you know, if we do something like that, this causes an error. Below we've got an error console, and this pretty much tells you what the error is. Sometimes in when you're programming stuff, the error console is not that helpful, but in this case, it kind of says what it says. It says the function line was expecting at least 4 arguments, but received only 3. So we can specify here 300, and that should sort it out for us. Now, what we can talk about here is ordering. Now, if you see here, we've got a background defined at the top, cool. We've got the rectangle defined next, cool, and with a line. Now, if we move the placement for this, so let's say Control C, we'll delete that, and then put that here, you can see the shape now covers the line. So ordering here does matter, and placement, that sort of thing, does matter quite a bit. So yeah, have a play around with it. Let's say, for example, you wanted the rectangle to sit somewhere in the top right corner, top bottom corner, or the center, for example. The canvas is 400 by 400. Yeah, so if you half that, it's 200 by 200. Now we want the shape, which is 100 centimeters itself, to sit roughly in the center. So you have to take that into account. So what we would do is, we have 100 here, we would half that, so that's 50, then 50 minus from 200. So hopefully the center should be something along the lines of 150, and our y should be 152. And there you are, it's in the center of the screen. Another thing that we should also look at is rect mode, so this thing here. Now what this actually does is it allows you to find where your center of your rectangle is. So for example, if we say rectangle 200 by 200, that's saying that we want the coordinate 200, 200 to be defined somewhere on the rectangle. So right now what we're doing is we're saying 200, 200, the coordinate is defined on the top left corner of the rectangle. But if we do something like rect mode center, what that will do is it will make our coordinate system look in the center of the rectangle instead. So we would say something like rect mode, all capitals, center. So that way you know the rectangle is in the center of the screen. Cool, right? Now, with programming in general, I think we should just talk about this for a minute. JavaScript is one of those languages where you don't necessarily have to write it correctly for it to work, but it's good practice to always write it correctly. So in case where I've written it here, I would say colon, colon, colon. And generally speaking, we don't want to have, we don't want to keep up our code messy. So if we have loads of spaces like this, it's a bit difficult to read. So generally speaking, we want to keep things quite neat and tidy. Stuff like this, right? And also, if you do end up making something messy, you can always go to edit, and then you can click tidy code here, and that should tidy up your code, create the spacings correct, and add the semicolons on the end. Okay, I think this is enough for now. We've covered quite a bit and we've spoken quite a lot. Yeah, just make sure you save your stuff. Yeah. But autosave's on, so we should be fine. Anyway, I'll catch you next time for the next episode, and yeah, just have a play around, write some code out, and see what you make. It'll be interesting. Alright, bye bye. See you in the next episode.